Nigga, we ain't gotta be nice. Nigga, we ain't gotta sell drugs. Nigga, we really rock right, nigga. Nigga, we truly godlike, nigga. Nigga, we been building space stations. Nigga, we are the United Nations. Nigga, the globe is too small, nigga. Niggas will always run y'all, nigga. Nigga, we are worth support, nigga. Nigga, we really are important, nigga. Peace, black people. We are important. We are worth support. You are locked into the Elevation Sessions powered by my book, 200 Years from Niggas to Gods, a guide to becoming a mature nation. This session is rooted in chapter 3, Get to Know Your Neighbor. But we're not just talking about the one who lives next door. We're talking about seeing each other without fear, listening to each other without assumptions, loving each other without conditions. This chapter is about tearing down the walls that divided us and replacing them with connections, with truth, and with care. Today, I got my homeboy M on the show. We've been co-workers for a little over 3 years, and every time we talk, I leave with something new to think about. M is bold, brilliant, and unapologetically themselves. They're a former drama teacher, a barber, and a 60-year-old freedom fighter for love, identity, and the black community. They move in the world with courage, and I knew they bring something real to this conversation. So what's up, M? How you doing, man? And thanks for being on the show.
Hey, I'm great. I'm happy to be here. This is fantastic.
Right on, man. So, so we'll just start off talking about, identity without an apology. I got a quote in the book that says, "Understanding each other is just not a moral idea; it's a survival necessity." So
hmm
I was wondering, was there ever a time you had to like fight just to be seen clearly by your own people?
yeah. So my family is from New York. My dad's in the military. As circumstances would have it, we moved to Vacaville, California, which is not my favorite place, but it was very stressful living there. As far as my identity as a black person. Um, it was a redneck town. There were
Hmm.
black people there. Most of them were also military people. Um, yeah, so it was definitely a place where I kind of had to carve out my own identity of how I saw myself as a black person. And sometimes it would be at odds with the black military kids that I went to school with. But, as we all know, black is not a monolith. We all have our own expressions and feelings about who we are as black people. And so, uh, it really kind of helped me to explore that.
Right. So out in Vacaville, I got a good friend of mine who lives out in Vacaville, and now it's kind of pretty populated with a lot of the black people have moved out there, and
Yeah.
so when I'm talking about getting to know your neighbor and one have you been seen clearly. I mean, was there just a time that you had to like really just stand up? Is there kind of a time that you had to and what happened with that? Where you had to just stand up and say, "Hey, look, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be, whether you like it or not." Because, like I said, this is my identity, and there's no apology for it.
Yeah. So that was pretty much every day.
That was
So
every day.
yeah, I mean, as how do I say this? As well as being a black person, I also identify as a queer person. So living
Hmm.
in a redneck town with rednecks and, military people, those were two things that, I had to kind of assert. And because my family was from Vacaville, we always had instilled in us this pride about who we were and being unapologetic about who we were, especially my grandmother. So I didn't take a lot of shit, although sometimes I would, have be threatened by my own people,
Right,
but I didn't let that bother me. I had people around me that loved me and supported me, and that was more important to me than the haters. So, you know,
right. So I mean, this book is about going from niggas to gods, and one of the thing I'm saying is, get to know your neighbor, understand different communities, understand different cultures, and how other cultures should understand you. Um, do you feel like through that journey or some of those fights that that actually made you a better person and got you to get away from some of those negative things or how can I say, things that may have were trying to pull you back.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it, a lot of my experience there, and I would say it's been my experience through my whole life, but definitely because I lived there the longest. I was there for like 12 years. I learned to kind of understand and accept people that were different from me, whether they be also black from a different, economic standpoint or a different region of the country that they moved to Vacaville, or even if it was a
Mhm.
completely different race of people. I knew a lot of Filipino people. I knew a lot of Black Filipino people. So it was basically, for me, it was just, allowing these people the space to express their Blackness in a way that worked for them, and just being respectful.
Right. So I mean, it seems like you come with a lot of there's a lot of layers. How do you keep it all balanced? In a place that constantly wants to box you in into being one thing. How do you keep that balanced?
Well, it can be difficult sometimes, I mean, somebody's always going to try to
Right.
test you, I mean, so there's that aspect of it. But, I would say the thing that really kind of helped me the most was meditation, um, and, taking time to care for myself, taking time to care for the ones that I love around me, spending lots of time out in nature. I'm
Mhm.
not a nature person, I'm a city person, but every now and then I like to go to Golden Gate Park and just walk around, for a couple of hours and experience that. But
Right.
I think that, a lot of it is just realizing that, again, black is not a monolith, and that my experience of blackness is just as valid as, yours or anybody else's experience as a black person.
Right.
And so I think having grown up over time and really kind of cementing that in who I am and understanding what that means for me, it's become a little bit easier. But there are still times where, I see something on the news where, I was visiting my parents a couple of months ago, and I don't remember what city it was in, but it was here in California. A white cop, had pulled over a Mexican guy and, started calling him the N-word, and it got
Right.
my mom and I into a discussion about people, white people, about white people,
Yeah.
and how sometimes, and this isn't a blanket statement either, because of course white isn't a monolith as well, but there's sometimes where I've just had it with white people, I'm just tired of always having
Correct.
to, assert who I am or define who I am or define who my people are, define who my friends are, and it gets tiring sometime. And my mom is the type of person where she's not really up for conflict. Everybody is, she's nice to everybody, and so
Right.
she took what I said the wrong way. And she thought I was saying that I don't like white people. And
Mm.
so I had to
Right.
explain to her, I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. And I have, you know, I I am allowed to be angry at the injustices that I see towards Black people and people of color in general
Right.
in this country. And, liking white people or not liking white people is not a part of the equation for me. If somebody is an asshole, they're an asshole, and
That's
so
it.
she wasn't understanding what I was saying, and I was getting angry because she wasn't understanding what I was saying. And so this story came on the news, and I'm like, that's what I'm talking about, you know? Even though I wasn't involved with that situation with that guy, I've been stopped in San Francisco and profiled, coming out of
Right.
stores, in stores,
Right.
and so I really needed her to understand that, her experience in Vacaville, again, Black is not a monolith. Her experience as a Black person in Vacaville is different than my experience as a Black person living in San Francisco, you know.
Right. And I mean, that's what I mean. I think again, that's what I'm trying to convey in my book, that we all need to start to understand each other's community and each other's culture so that we can get to being more of part of what I believe is going to be the human race as opposed to just this race or that race.
Yes.
Because I mean, well, I have a quote in the book that says, when you get to know your neighbor, prejudice dies. And
Mhm.
so, when you start to just understand in different cultures and you can kind of immerse yourself in someone else's culture, get in their community, I think you just kind of it just goes away. You understand more, because I think it's more fear or just a lack of understanding that creates that prejudice. And so, with that, I was wondering, what does community mean to you, and how do you find your community and or build your community?
Community is very important to me. Again, having, moved from Vacaville, um, I was very, how do I say this? So, I moved from Vacaville to Oakland, and Oakland was a godsend for me. It was like I got to see other people that look like me, but
Right,
also other people that look like me that were expressing that in different ways, and
right,
everybody was cool with it. I remember going to Uhuru House, which, is no longer in existence. I loved that place. But just going there and having the people not be suspicious of the fact that, maybe I was going to
you're
steal.
in there looking.
Exactly, and
Yeah,
I just it was an eye-opening experience, and it was an experience that I will forever hold in my heart. And so I just try to remember the people that I met when I lived in Oakland and the experiences that I had in Oakland, and try to extend that same grace to other people that I meet, whether it be Black people in particular, since that's what we're talking about, but also
mhm,
other people that are just different from me in general. Another part of that equation is the fact that my dad was in the military. So I've always been around people that are different, different countries, different ideologies, different religions. That's just how I grew up. So it's something that, again, I try to hold in my everyday life. And, as far as community is concerned, I have a small community of people that support me and love me for who I am. And I try to do the same for them. And when it comes to other people that really don't want me to be a part of a community that they're involved in, or have some sort of issue with me, whether it be because I'm queer or because I'm Black, you know, I don't really care. You know what I mean?
right,
You
right,
can kick
right,
rocks.
right, right, right.
You know what I mean?
So
It's like you're limiting yourself and your view of the world, and that in the end is going to hinder you. It's
correct,
not hurting me, it's hurting you in the end.
right,
I love the world, and even with all the shit that's going on right now in the world, I love this place.
right,
And I want to make it better for me, and I want to make it better for people that are coming up after me as well.
right, and the others who share it with us. You
Exactly.
know, so like, well, what damage do we do to the culture when we judge how other Black folks live or express themselves? So when we say you have to be unapologetically yourselves, what do we damage the culture at all, or what damage is done when we judge someone for expressing themselves?
I think a lot of damage is done because, again, you're not allowing different expressions of Blackness, right? You're
Right,
saying that Blackness fits in this really narrow parameter of what it's supposed to be, and there is no exception outside of that. And that's
right.
that's not true. You
That's
got
not true
people
at
that
all.
live in the South who are Black. You got people that live in large cities who are Black, and those experiences they're very different. But it doesn't mean that it makes one or the other any less Black, you know?
Correct.
So, yeah.
No, no, 100%. And again, this is about again getting to know your neighbor and getting to understand other cultures and understanding that you know um, expression just comes in all different forms. And when you let someone just be themselves and you understand who they are and you get to understand that person, it just makes for a better relationship. I think in all relationships, your partner relationship, your business relationship, and just even your friend relationship. It's
Yeah.
just that when you can be you, you show up as you, people are willing to accept who you are instead
Yeah.
of your showcase.
Right. And why would you want to walk around the world or present yourself to the world as something that you're not, so that you fit
Correct.
into this narrow idea of what blackness is supposed to be? It's like that's you're cutting yourself short, but you're also cutting, your family short, your friends short, your community short. I agree with you. You have to come as who you are and how you are. And
Correct.
that should just be a part of the melange that is blackness in America, you know.
Right.
So,
Correct.
we have black people that come from other countries. My grandfather is from the Caribbean, and so it's automatically assumed that when black people come from other countries, that they have to kind of meld into what being a black American is. But that's a completely different experience, and
Right.
so we can learn something by, allowing other people to experience or to express their blackness in a way that just kind of expands our worldview, beyond our yard, beyond our city, beyond our country. And I think that's a good thing. I think that's really what people ask, what's the meaning of of life? The meaning of life is to express and understand and experience other things, and not be so shut off to it, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean you're 100% correct. I mean that it's just about understanding different cultures and knowing that like you said, you talked about the world, and that world that everyone one lives in, needs to be peaceful. So that, I mean, there's always going to be some kind of negativity on the earth. That's just what the earth is made of positive and negative vibes.
Right.
But as long as we can share this earth together with other people and understand that, hey, that's just something that you do in your community, and I'm not quite understanding of it yet, but hey, I'm willing to learn about it, willing to take the time to figure out how that can help me, because a community, even our own community, that is like, if it when it's built on ignorance, it's weak. You know what I mean? It's divided, suspicious, and fragile. And so I was wondering, what's something you wish people understood about your journey? What's something that you wish that people just knew more about you, him, the person?
Well, I wish that people understood that my identifying as queer is not separate from my blackness. It is all a part of the same person. So, I have people that will say to me, especially when I was involved in a lot of black activism when I lived in Oakland,
Mhm.
people would say, you have to be black first and queer second. And I said, well, are you black first and straight second? Like, it comes as a
Right,
package. That's who you are. You can't separate that from yourself, So I think that's what I want people to know, is that just because, I identify as queer, or, I'm vegan, or whatever the case may be, or somebody else that's completely different from them, that doesn't negate their blackness. They're still black,
right,
and I think there's such a beauty in our culture and richness in our culture across the board, across all spectrums of expression of blackness. Like, that should be celebrated. It shouldn't be something that somebody says, no, it has to be like this. And if it's not
right,
like this, then it's not real.
right,
There's no one reality. Everybody
correct,
has their own reality, their own experiences, then their own expression. And I think it's better when you allow people to express themselves in a way that's authentic to them, so that then they can show up to the table and be an authentic person and help the larger community.
correct. A community that can build together can definitely grow together. And so I was wondering, how do you still show up with love? You're very compassionate. It sounds like sometimes there has been some times in your life where again there has been trouble. You had to really stand up and fight. But how do you show up with love when people are trying to still judge you? Again, they put you in that small little box when you know that we're much bigger than this small box.
Hmm. I think a lot of it is just being confident in who I am and how I show up in the world for myself and for other people. I know that at the end of the day, when I lay my head on the pillow, that I'm a good person, and that I didn't make somebody else feel smaller so that I can feel bigger.
Look at yourself right now. Who are you? More importantly, who do you want to be? Every day you make choices. Every day you move. But are you really living or just existing? You were never meant to be stuck. You were never meant to just survive. You were built to build, to lead, to master. Enough. The difference between staying the same and leveling up is one decision. One moment when you say, no more. I refuse to stay here. 200 years from niggas to gods. The transformation starts now.
I don't
Right.
see the point in that. Like, what's the, we're not in high school.
Right.
We're living our lives on a day-to-day basis, and life
Right.
is rough. It's, we got bills to pay, we got people that, we got to work for, we got families that we're responsible for. So, I really, like, again, like I said before, it's like I really just love the world, even with all its complexities and shittiness, especially with what's going on right now. And
Right.
so I just want to be there to share who I am and my love and support towards other people. So yeah,
Right
that's
on.
really important to me, and I've always been that way. I've been I've been that way since I was a kid. My parents were always like, "What are you
Right.
bringing this person home from, from school for?" And I was like, "Oh, this
Yeah.
person identifies as like there was a girl in my class. She identified her family were they didn't identify. They were Seventh Day Adventists, if I remember correctly, and so the teacher brought cupcakes to the class. She was black. The teacher brought cupcakes to the class, and they don't celebrate birthdays. That's not something that they do, And so
Right.
it just broke my heart to think that this girl had to sit there while we're all eating cupcakes, and
Right.
couldn't be a part
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
this celebration. And so I understood where she was coming from and that it was a part of her culture, but I also wanted her to understand that, just because um, you know, we were doing one thing and she was doing another, that we still were connected.
You're not. You're still a part of the group. We understand you're going through your thing. When we finish, I mean, I'm eating the cupcake because I like them,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
when you finish, you can still come kick it with us and hang out.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
I snuck a cupcake to her later, and of course she didn't eat it because that's not what her culture tells her to do. But she really
Right.
appreciated the fact that I kind of stepped away from the rest of the class and said, "Hey, I see you as who you are. I respect that. But I also want you to know that, we're celebrating you at this moment, and that's okay."
Right.
And so she appreciated that, and we became really good friends as a result of that.
Right, right. Now that story right there is kind of where I was kind of trying to feel like that helps you because what I'm trying to understand or trying to get across with this book is that one portion of coming from that lower portion of yourself to get to that higher portion of yourself to get to that God thing is to open yourself up and get to understanding different cultures and understanding different ways of life. And so that was just really what I wanted you to kind of touch on right there. And I think that story summed it up how, you know, you were out to help someone else, but still that fulfilled you and made and I think that made you want to do it again and again and again to fill that cup up with that type of action. And I think if we all did that and we took that more seriously, we would, like I said, get out of that niggerism and go towards God. Because I believe that's truly where our people want to be, is at the God level.
Right. Right. I agree with you 100%. And, it's hard because we have a culture here in the United States that tells us that we're never going to be gods. We're always going to be niggas. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like we see it
Right.
every day in the news, And so I think it is important that you go out and see your neighbor, meet your neighbor. I have a neighbor downstairs. She's from Ethiopia. Her experience as a Black person is different than my experience as a Black person. But every time I see her, she greets me with a smile and she's happy to see me. And the same, back my feeling back towards her. And I think that's how you're building community. It's just you have to have your heart open. And I think for a lot of people, that can feel really vulnerable. But you have to make that first step, because if you stay in that lane and you don't, expand the whole freeway, you know,
Right.
you're basically living the stereotype that society is putting on top of you. You know what I mean? You
Yes,
have to
sir.
step outside of that and contribute in a positive way, not only to your life, but to the community at large, whether again, it be in your city, your town, your country, the world,
Right.
you're not doing anybody any benefit by staying in this little box and shutting everything else out. All you're doing is damaging and hurting yourself. You're not hurting
Right.
anybody else, you're just hurting yourself.
So, one question that always comes up about the book is that title, that N word there. And what do you feel about that word as the title, and what will be something that you could tell somebody who may not want to read the book because of the title?
Yeah, the word is a very hot topic within our community, right? You know,
Yes.
uh, we have the hard R version, which comes from, more of the white people, and then we have the version that how it's spelt on the cover of your book. And, if it's something that maybe offends you, or you're kind of like, well, maybe this book isn't for me. Well, maybe the book isn't for you. You know what I mean? It's like maybe the book is
Hmm.
not specific for you, and but also at the same time, it's like if you're letting that make your decision of whether or not to read the book, the information in the book is valuable. So I think I understand where you're coming from by using that word. It's a word that I don't use in my personal life. It's a word that, I still listen to hip hop, so I understand where it comes from, and I think that, I don't think it was wrong to use that word. I understand why you used that word, because our culture and the culture at large, again, puts us in this little box, you know, and so, how do we break out of that box? And that box could be Black people, it could be niggas. You know what I mean? It just really depends on how you see yourself. But I think you have to kind of look beyond your personal feelings about that word and understand why you used that word. You right?
Right.
You're trying to
Right.
pick a particular section of our community that has kind of closed themselves off to the larger community, and has kind of separated themselves into this one definition. And, to be honest, that's the definition that, a lot of white American culture puts on us, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing, tap dancing and rapping, that's what
Right.
we do. And so how do you move from that to being a god, and so you can't just say how to move from being a regular old Black person to being a god.
Right.
It's a powerful statement to have that on the book. And
Right.
I think it was a smart idea.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely meant to be, a shock and awe, but mainly just to, come from the lowest portion of ourselves to the highest portion of ourselves. I had an idea to use, from slaves to masters, and mastery is kind of more what the book is about, as far as like mastering a trade, mastering your mind,
Right.
understanding, mastering the law, mastering finance.
Mhm.
But that slaves to masters just doesn't hit like niggas to gods. And
Exactly,
so,
exactly.
You know,
Yeah,
I wanted to grab your attention. And, also, from my point of view, the word never really comes up again in the book except to express towards the title. It's not a bunch of, in my opinion, some people get like I'm trying to go take you down a historical road. Believe it or not, some people trip off to God. I try to say, hey, I got this book, 200 Years to Niggas to Gods, and I'm already godly. I don't need another religious book. And so, I've read into a couple things, but this book isn't about that. This book is about transformation, and everybody should pick it up.
right. I completely agree. And if you are not understanding the title of the book, then maybe the book is not for you.
Right.
Maybe you need to go back and reflect and see where you are in your journey. And, maybe it's just not for you, and that's fine. It
And
doesn't
that's
have to be
okay.
for everybody. But
Right.
again, I think, with hip hop culture and just, black culture, pop culture in general, I think it's making a very powerful statement. So it's something that we hear a lot. I mean, it's just like I'm trying to think of who the rapper was. I don't think it was Kendrick. It might have been Lupe Fiasco. I can't remember, but he was using the word negus,
Mm.
Negus, which, if I remember correctly, was like, the word for king. And so he was kind of trying to reform or refashion the word niggas into negus,
Right.
you know? And so you can get upset about that, right?
Right.
But again,
Right. Right.
maybe
Right.
it's not for you. You know what I mean? There's somebody who
Right.
listened to that song and was like, damn, that's really deep. Maybe I need to look into that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, and I feel like that's what your book does too. If you're judging the book based off of what you read, what you're seeing on the front, which a lot of people do with books in general, but it's provocative. You need to open up the book and read it and see what it's about. And like you said,
Correct.
you're not the whole book isn't just niggas, right?
Right.
You're given instruction on how to move from your base self to a higher self. Even with the word God, right? You're not saying that, I'm going to be a God and eventually everybody's going to have a religion around me. But if you are a person who is godly, right? Your goal is to be a higher self, and that's what
Yeah.
you're saying.
Correct. 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 Right. And I also believe that once if we do start following all the principles in this book, the word will naturally go away because we won't be acting as such. And I think as long as we're acting as such, the word will be around, it will be prevalent because we're making it prevalent. But once we kind of do things to get away with it, because I don't want us to be called that anymore. I want us to be called this. And I think that, again, we follow these principles in this book, the word will just naturally go away.
Yes, yes. It's a word that, it doesn't have to be a part of your vocabulary to express yourself as a Black person. And I think that's a
Correct.
big thing too, right? It's like if you are a Black person, you have to, in some way or form, use that as a part of your everyday vocabulary. And I think we need to replace it with things like gods or higher self
Right.
or beautiful person.
Right.
I mean, I love our culture so much, and it's just so rich, and there's so much that it has to offer, not only us as Black people, but also the communities at large, the world at large. We have such an effect worldwide with what we do. You know,
Believe it.
they say we're niggas, right? But we got hip hop in every country. We got fashion in every country. Now you've got, I was a part of an African religious house here in San Francisco for a while, and you had people that were white that were a part of that. You had people that were Latino that were a part of that. You had people
Right.
that were Asian that were a part of that. And you get that with Buddhism, right? Or
Right.
Christianity. So why can't we have that validity with our spiritual ideas as well? So,
Correct.
yeah,
Right. That's the soundtrack that comes with the collector's edition. It says everybody want to be us because we
exactly.
extremely creative, but
Exactly.
they want to make us think that we're the scum of the earth. And
Right.
that's the part that I really want to, really attack, is that how do you call us the scum of the earth, but want to be exactly like us?
Exactly.
You know what I
Because
mean?
if you
So
think about it this way, if we were not a part of the world culture, if we were not a part of American culture, what the fuck they got, right? It's kind of like,
right,
you know what I mean? It's like you got some white rice. That's what you got. You know what I mean?
right. That's it.
Exactly. You don't have no Louisiana sausage. You don't
You
have,
know,
you know what I mean? You don't have a lot of American culture would be really, really boring and sad if it wasn't
right,
for the contributions of Black people. You know, I mean, even if you look at, people are like, when I was growing up, people are like, oh, rock and roll music, that's for white people. It's like, no, we created that shit. We created that
right,
shit. We created
right,
jazz. We created blues. We took
right,
blues from nothing and brought it into something that's an art form that still exists today. And I think unfortunately, with rock and roll, a lot of us have kind of bought into this idea that it's a white thing, and
right,
it's like, no, we created that shit.
right.
There would
They, drums, guitars, and bands came from the black man.
exactly, which came
You
from
know
jazz, which came from blues,
Right,
so it's like they would have, the way we dress, the way we express ourselves, the slang that we say on a day-to-day basis, right?
right,
I mean, I always find it funny when I see some, white supremacist dude on TV or somebody who has a sort of white supremacist idea use words like cool. I'm like, that's from jazz, you
right,
know? Come up with your own word. You
right,
know?
right.
If you don't like us that much, then stop using our culture. You know what I
Come
mean?
on now. Come
Yeah.
on. Right. Well, right on, Emma. Thanks a lot. So we're kind of closing it out. But the last question I like to ask you is, how did you feel about the book overall? And, again, this is the chapter about, we're talking about chapter 3, getting to know your neighbor. And how do all that, rise into the book? And how did you feel about the book? How did I do?
I think the book is really good. I really like the contracts that you have in the back of the book because it really kind of reinforces the ideas that you've come up with in the book. I think the book is very easy to read, so it's not like somebody needs to have a college degree to understand what's in there. A lot of
Mhm.
it is common knowledge, but a lot of it is things that we don't hear on a day-to-day basis, you know.
Right.
And so I think you did an excellent job with the book. I like the way that the chapters approach a specific idea and breaks it down, such as the one that we're talking about today, because I think, you can get caught up in your head when you're kind of thinking about, how do I get out of this nigga mentality? You know what I mean? How do I move beyond this? And your book gives people a way to you're laying it out right there for them. They can read it, they can see it, and then they've got the contracts in the back of the book that reinforces what you've written in the book. And I think that's a really powerful thing.
Well, thanks a lot, Em.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show today. And so, chapter 3 isn't just about getting to know your neighbor. It's about opening yourself up, listening, learning, and growing, letting down your guard and building something real, rooted in truth and not fear. One who speaks with care, sees with love, and shows up with truth. M didn't just bring honesty today, they brought wisdom. And their life is proof that living loud and proud and living black is a powerful act of love, the kind of love this book and this series is built on. So if this session moved you in any kind of way, please go pick up the collector's edition where you get the ebook, the audiobook, exclusive artwork, the soundtrack done by me. But more than that, you'll be joining a movement rooted in the transformation, truth, and real elevation. So peace, black people. We are important. We are worth supporting. These are the elevation sessions. I see you next time. Thanks, Em, for showing up. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you.